Shine your light, shine, shine, shine your light, shine, shine.
Hello, it's Nancy Maddox with WYTV7, Christian Broadcasting Network and Shine Your Light Radio Ministry. I'm broadcasting from Little Rock, Arkansas, and WYTV7 is in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we have a wonderful guest today, an educator and a published author. And she's so exciting. It's going to be really, really exciting what she has to share with us today. Her name is Miss Sera Jordan. And I'm going to be asking her a lot of fun questions. So I hope you learn a lot from this show. Very excited. WYTV7 is a nonprofit, and we do take donations, and we use our donations to promote the broadcaster shows like this one and several others. And we do put them up on iHeartRadio. So it is an international broadcast of all of our shows. So I'm real excited about that. And our mantra at WYTV7 is, if we reach one, we've done our job. So I'm real excited about that. Miss Sera, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Miss Nancy. It is an honor to finally meet you. Thank you so much thank you so much for having me on your broadcast this evening.
Well, thank you. I'm real excited, and I'm excited for the viewers and the listeners to watch this and really bless them by your words, and of course God's going to bless us because we've been put together, and it's just really exciting. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey, where you were, how you got where you were, and that kind of thing.
Well, relative to my testimony, I gave my heart to the Lord when I was a teenager, and several years later, I earned my degree in education, and after completing my degree, I then decided to get married. Now, in my mind's eye, and at least most young girls, we have the ideology of the knight in shining armor would come and whisk us away and on his white horse, and we would live happily ever after. Unfortunately, that did not occur for me. Shortly after getting married, I began experiencing physical, emotional, psychological, and verbal abuse from the person who I thought would love me the way my birth family loved me. And my birth family, growing up in my birth family, our parents, my parents, they argued, but it never escalated to the point of, domestic violence. I don't even know I even knew what domestic violence was, because it wasn't anything that I was privy to or that I knew anything about growing up as a child. So as time went on, so it was a shock to my system. So as time went on, things got progressively worse, and it's as though my mind shifted and went and became numb to the entire environment. I was just existing. I was operating on autopilot, just going through the motions day in, day out. It was as though I was in a nightmare that I couldn't get up from. And my mind also created this defense mechanism that I was sort of like living two lives. I would wear the social mask for the people when I went outside, and then when I was home, my mind automatically reverted, like the way how a light switch turns off and on. I would automatically switch back to being an inept, docile, submissive, unhappy person. And when I went out, even though that I would smile, I was always guarded because I didn't want people to know what was going on in this so-called happy marriage. And so this marriage also, or this environment, created such a negative mindset in me that I began to hate myself. I had no self-worth. I I'm sorry, it's taking me back for a moment.
I'm so sorry. I
No,
really
no,
don't
no.
mean to do that to
No, no,
you, but you know,
no.
I firmly believe in real talk. I believe in being real on my show. And the purpose of Shine Your Light radio ministry is so that you can shine your light of what you've been through, and it will help so many other people. But I must share with you, Miss Sarah, that I grew up in a home like that too. I
Mm,
haven't experienced domestic violence per se, maybe some verbal abuse, but I've been married 45 years, but it hasn't been physical. But I
mhm.
grew up in a home where my dad did that to my mother. So I saw that all the time. And it's just very difficult. I mean, I interviewed another lady today, and she was domestically abused 45 years ago, and she
Yes.
rose above it and got out. I mean, it's just difficult, and it's just a cycle that just never goes away. And when I was a teenager, when I was a little girl, that was 60 years ago that my mother was going through the same thing. And it does. It takes away your self-esteem, your self-confidence. You don't think you're worth anything. And when you talk about the mask in front of people, then
Yes.
yes, that is exactly what happens. You have to put on a different face when you're in front of people, so they'll not know anything's wrong. But in my situation, when I was a little girl, I told my grandparents about it.
Mm,
I told my grandparents everything that went on behind closed doors, and then that's when I almost got in trouble because I felt like I provoked my grandfather into he was a Christian. He
mhm,
preached the Bible all the time, but I felt like I provoked him into wanting to do bad things to my father, like kill him for
mhm.
hurting.
Yes.
So, I mean, I understand that, and I think anyone that hears this is going to understand, and that's what I want to happen. I want all of the people that are domestic, that have been through domestic violence, maybe that are still in it, get that courage and and know that God is there if we just let God take over and do it for us. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to let you calm down a minute so you can go on, and I appreciate you for sharing.
I thank you. So I created, uh, I developed, as a result of this toxic environment, I developed a negative mindset, as I mentioned earlier, that I hated myself. I had no self worth. I was always sorry, even when it wasn't my fault. I took the blame for everything. And, uh, it got so intense at a certain point that I even attempted suicide. But had it not been for the grace of God that spared my life, that I'm able to share my story of transformation with so many of you out there that may be going through what you're going through. And I stayed for over 20 years. And most people wonder, why do you stay in an environment like that? I call this the domestic violence conundrum. You're caught between a rock and a hard place because you want to leave, but at the same time, you're afraid, A, of what people are going to say. In my mind, when I got married, it was till death do us part. So divorce was taboo. We wouldn't to even say that. I was afraid of being alone, stepping out. I didn't have the kind of faith that I have now back then. I even thought God forgot about me, but I continued to pray. I continued to persevere, and I'm here to share that story that I'm no longer existing, but I am living because of God's grace.
Absolutely, Miss Sarah, and I'm so proud that you had the courage to move forward, and that you had the courage now to speak out, because so many people are suffering with
Yes.
this, and it's not only women. Ugly women that are doing this to men too. They're emasculating them and just treating them really bad, and no one knows how to get out of it. I mean, I was just speaking to a friend not more than 30 minutes ago,
Hmm.
and she was saying, I don't know how, I can't get over this relationship ending. I can't get over it. I cry
Hmm.
all the time. And I said, well, just look to God. Just start praying fervently and just turn it all over to God, and He will walk you through it. And that is what will happen. So I'm happy for you. But what amazes me is that a lot of times people think it's the economic the social economic that you're in,
Mm-hmm.
echelon, the lower people, the poor people, but you're an educated woman and you went through this. So
Yes,
it
ma'am.
doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yes, ma'am.
matter what economic, social scale you're on. It can happen to you. So,
Absolutely.
and I want people to understand that. Right now, I want to stop and give the National Domestic Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. I had no idea that this was going to go this way, and we're going to get into your book in just a few minutes.
Yes,
I had
ma'am.
no idea, and I'm overwhelmed every time I do an interview and this starts happening. I want people to know the National Domestic Violence Hotline, because if we help one person,
Yes,
then we've
ma'am.
done our jobs as far as I'm concerned. And then also I want to talk about suicide a little bit too. You're the third person today that I've talked to that wanted to commit suicide to get out of what they were in. It was the one I was on the phone with a little while ago, and another lady that I interviewed today. And I'm thinking, I mean, I understand it because I saw my mother there. My
Mm-hmm.
mother couldn't commit suicide because she had 3 babies to raise.
Mm-hmm.
She had to stay in it because she refused to take her children home for her parents to raise.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
the minute my baby brother, who was the baby, turned 18, she left the relationship after 25 years. She left the relationship and went home to her parents. But that took
Yes.
a lot of courage, and there was a lot of dings and beatings and everything else in between. But the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255. And when we post this, and we're going to put those numbers on there too. We're going to edit it, put the numbers on there, because this is starting to become, I mean, for that to happen 3 times in one day, to me, I'm like, this is a sign from God that I really have to put those numbers out there for people to know and call, because I want to touch everybody that we can, because it's happening in so many instances.
Yes.
But go ahead, and if you have more to share about that, I would love to hear that.
Yes, ma'am. So there were several failed attempts to leave, but every time I tried to leave, because of my imprisoned mind, I went back. And I'm thinking about the shame and what would people think, all of those things, because the enemy uses that, that fear, and fear. My mom used this. The fear stands for false evidence appearing real. When he overtakes your mind, the enemy or fear, that you think that you're in a prison, even though there are no bars, but that the bars are in your mind. So it took several years to even get up enough courage to say that I wanted to leave. But God created what I consider to be the perfect storm, where the person had traveled out of the country, and God said, "This is your last chance." I clearly heard that in my spirit. If you don't leave now, this I'm not, basically I'm not responsible. Because see, we ask God for help, but God is looking to us to take that first step, because if he gave us authority, he can't take it back. He never goes back on his word. So we have to take that first step. And when I took that first step, my family welcomed me with open arms. And I thought that they would not, because over the years, I was alienated from them. I would get to talk with them, but, it was very, it was monitored. You have to be careful. And of course, then there was, questioning back and forth, what did you talk about, etc. So I was grateful that they were there for me. And even though after going through this kind of challenge, there isn't any way that you'll come out unscathed. You come out with battle scars. And what happened to me when I did leave in seclusion, hiding somewhere, I began to suffer with a form of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, whereby I would have real life nightmares of this person coming after me. I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, crying, doused in sweat. If I heard somebody that sounded like him, or if someone discussed a particular topic, or they said something, or they spoke to me in a certain way that would invoke that fear, my mind automatically triggered back to that toxic environment. So it took several years to get to where I am now, this confident, vibrant, you know,
Well,
woman.
you are absolutely beautiful, and you have an absolute gorgeous and fantastic spirit. I love that. And I often tell people, as I'm discussing this with people, that because I grew up in an environment like that until I was 17 years old and moved out and got married, I to this day can pick out domestic violence, whether it's the man or the woman that's doing it, to
Mhm.
this day. I can tell by their tone, I can tell by their voice, I can tell by their actions,
Yeah.
and it's little things like grabbing people by the arm and squeezing it real hard.
Mhm.
You don't understand. If you haven't been through that, you don't understand that that's a sign of domestic violence.
Correct.
That you know when they get home, and you can tell the victim is oftentimes the one that's guarding everything they say, and you just know. And a lot of times I have my husband has to kind of hold me back when I really see it happening and I'm close to it, because I want to march right up and say something. He's like, no, you realize if you say something, that's more licks they're going to get when they get behind closed doors. And I'm like, yes, but I do want to say something. I really want to do it, but I can't. So, but yeah, so I totally understand what you mean about that. And the other thing is that if we would just listen to God, and that's what people, they think God's forsaken them when they're in an environment like this. We all think that God has forsaken us. Why have you done this? Why have you allowed this to happen? But what we sometimes forget is that God's grace is always there. He
Oh,
always loves us, but it's up to us to stop, to be still and listen. We have
beast.
to listen, and we have to make the move.
Yeah.
So really exciting, and I'm just intrigued again that you're highly educated woman, and that you went through this too. And how long were you in this relationship before you got the courage to leave?
It, total 23 years, but it took 5 years to get enough courage, you know, at the back end of that 23 years to actually say I wanted a divorce. So
My
I
goodness.
said it, but it was after this person was out of the country, where they couldn't convince me to stay.
Yes.
And, you know, I called my family. Like I said, they were welcoming, you know, as somebody who just came from home from war, so to speak, which technically sort of I was. And they welcomed me with open arms. And what happened was God started to just open doors and just transform my life. Now, healing is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for your system to heal. And what I literally had to do was to rebuild Sera, and I'm still rebuilding Sera. But what God, and I'm so grateful to Him that He allowed my essence to still be alive, to still be there. The essence of who I was never died. I call it that He resurrected me and
Mm-hmm.
gave me this opportunity to be here. And as I was healing, God gave me uh, three things, at least three processes in my mind that I talk about in the book. And the first thing is He gave me its acronym called ACT, ACT, always consciously think. And that ACT principle is for you to become consciously aware of what you think about, what you say, and what you do. Now, it is a difficult process and it takes time, and it is an ongoing process, probably for the rest of my life. But it is for you to, I mean, we all have millions of thoughts going through our minds every second of every day. But those thoughts, because it flashes in your mind, if the thought flashes and says, jump off of a bridge, no, common sense would tell you, don't jump off of a bridge. But it is that processing in your mind through this ACT principle of being consciously aware of what is in your mind, because our words have power. Every time we speak, we're either creating our life, building it up, or we can destroy it by the words we say. So, for example, if I said, and the second process is triaging your thoughts. So, a friend of mine who read the book, she equated triaging to similar to being in the emergency room. The triage nurse sees the person, they come in, they make a determination as to the level of urgency, you know, relative to that particular person. And what triaging your thoughts mean, if I'm thinking negatively, you're really monitoring and making a decision as to what will actually come out. Just because you think a negative thought doesn't mean you have to say it out. For example.
And you know, that's one thing that we all need to practice more at. And I really want to get into the book a little bit more. I only have a few minutes left. But that's one thing we all have an issue with, is we don't think before we speak.
Correct.
Thought pops in our head. A lot of times it comes out of our mouth, and we really should just stop and think about what we're saying and doing. I mean, all of us could use more of that, and make a conscious effort to not say things that just pop in your mind, because it's so hurtful. Well, anyway, the name of the book is Stop Existing and Live. Allow God to be the pilot of your life's journey. And it sounds like you've done that, and I'm so excited for you, Miss Sera, and I hope that you have continued success. Do you have a copy of the book with you laying there?
Absolutely.
Can you hold it up so we can see it?
Can you see that?
Stop existing and live. If you think about that in the manner of what Miss Sera's been talking about, of being in a domestic violence situation, you had children too, which made it doubly hard for you. It's always harder when you have children that you have to raise. So I can understand how your journey has brought you to this, and how God has led you to write this book. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm hoping that my people and the viewers will listen to this and want to make better of themselves and just stop existing and live. And I know that with this story that you've given us and this interview, I'm going to want to bring you back again when we have a little bit more time. 30 minutes is really not enough for me to get everything, all the knowledge out of you that you need, for that the viewers need to hear and see.
Yes, ma'am.
In closing, I'd just like to say, would you like to share a little bit more about the book? A couple of more minutes about the book. I know you've given us 2 processes that are in there.
Yes, ma'am. Well, what the book will do, it will equip you with better life tools to enable you to create a stronger, more formidable you. It is also an honest journey. It enables you to see you in the raw. Mm-hmm. It opens your heart to change. If you open your heart to change, I believe that change will come about as a result. I am grateful for this book in that it teaches you that you have the power to transform your life. It teaches you also that change first begins in our mind. That's where change begins, not doing it, but it begins in our minds. I also make reference to, there's a part toward the end of the book where I tell people to envision themselves as a piece of coal that is unignited. You're sitting in a coal furnace and you're not moving. Nothing is happening. But you have the power to strike the match to create fire and life in your life. But you have to take that first step. So I'm talking to all the women out there. It doesn't mean that you leave right away if you're in that kind of situation. Don't leave. You have to leave when it is safe for you to do so. But you do have the power to change your life. Reach out to a clergy person, a professional, a friend, but you have to talk about it to somebody that you trust. The more that we hide it, the more it becomes to fester.
And that is the true dilemma of this type of situation, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. In our minds, we're programmed to hide it and to put on our sunny face when we're out in public. And that is the very worst thing that could happen. I just told a friend an hour ago, don't care what your partner does. Don't care what they say. People will see them for who they are, and it won't take long for them to see it. And my guess is the people already know what's going on. If they're like me and they're intuitive, then if I saw you two together, mm-hmm. I would already know it. You wouldn't have to say a word to me, because a lot of us went through that in our childhood and we realize it. I mean, it's just you just have to open up. You have to let God take control and
Yes.
let God handle it for you. And it's just been such a delightful interview. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I
Thank
know
you.
that you've arrived when you can talk about this and you can
Yes, ma'am.
share it with everyone to help other people. And you truly are shining your light. And I love that. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Where can we get the book, Miss Sera?
Well, you can order it online from my website, www.stopexistingandlive.com. There's also the ebook version that is on Amazon. You just have to go to amazon.com and just type in Stop Existing and Live, and it will pop up. Also, they can people can follow me I'm on Facebook. I am on Twitter. It's at Let God in Your Life. I also have a blog, www.letgodinyourlife.com, because my goal is to connect people to God and to
Yes,
realize that there is an option, because the way that the world is going, God is the answer. That's all.
absolutely,
That's the
absolutely.
answer.
Well, I thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
we're going to have to wrap it up. And I'm just so excited for you. I'm so happy for you that you were able to overcome all of that.
And thank you so very much for this opportunity, Miss Nancy.
You're
God bless
welcome.
you.
You're welcome, sweetheart. Okay.